I recently retired from Wells Fargo. My most recent job as the head of model risk management for Wells Fargo. I'm overseeing all model development and deployment in Wells Fargo and the people who's doing that. So that was my last responsibility. A little over 10 years I did that. And the last 20 years in financial industry. Prior to that, about 12 years, I was in engineering. I designed car engine for Ford Motor Company. So engineering at the beginning, my education engineering, gasoline was in my blood. And then I went to the dark side of banking and finance. And never regret it. I had a lot of great time in the last 20 years. It's kind of an interesting journey. I am always very quantitative and analytical person. I'll always focus on the physics and the math of how to design things. So I came to risk management because this is the quantitative things, the thing that I love to do. So I entered from that, and the rest is the history. Now in Gen AI, we're dealing with language, we're dealing with image, which humans don't look at it as number. Computer scientists, statistician, mathematician converted it into number. For every word or token, we break it into token, we assign a number. And that number get represented. That's why all the complication in neural network. So it's all of these with AI. Sometimes we make a distinction. One is predictive AI, the other one is generative AI because AI generates something. Well, predictive AI predict too. They predict, so it generates something. But if you feed it back, keep generating, become generative as well. So in terms of methodology, and very, very fundamental thing, doing very, very similar thing. The usage are different, right? The usage are very, very different. And people get fascinated with the Gen AI, and it's because it touched something that they can relate, they can feel. Language, image. This is something that we naturally as human beings process every day. So the traditional predictive AI dealing with number, okay, something that human not very good at, and these are very good at, and better. If you talking about making prediction with number, predictive AI is most of the time better than human being because human is not good with number. Now, when we talk about language and vision, human is will to be very good at this. And making computer to have the expectation like human is complicated, it's difficult. And people have standard, hey, I can do this one. And all of those debate. In predictive AI, typically we're dealing with very few input. We call it variable. What's the different input, right? Different input, and that's typically finite. Model is probably a 100 input, 200 input or something. Now, when we're dealing with Gen AI, particular language model, we're dealing with word or portion of word that we call it token. Input can be million, can be trillion. Now, the fundamental things that different is this. In predictive AI, we control the input. What variable we're going to use. And we control the range of input for each variable. So it's very controlled, the input. So we can test it appropriately because we test it within a certain boundary. Now in Gen AI, it's very different. The input is unbounded. There's no such thing as variable. Any token, any word will go. It's the second that really more fundamental. In predictive AI, people very careful with the data. What data we're going to use, they do data cleaning, processing, and all of those when we build model. In the industry, real world application is always very, very narrow. We don't expect this model can do math. We don't expect this model to understand law. We understand all different kind of things. So the big provider, they want to create model that can do everything. Well, real world is not like that. Real world application is always very specific. In that regard, I believe we don't need a big model. We need small model. Small model will be enough because very, very specialized to do certain things. When we start talking about specialized small model, and that's what I'm thinking the direction that we should go. Company need to own their own model because small, trained with curated data, the foundation of model building is always conceptual soundness, data quality, and data integrity. Now people is rushing very fast. They don't want to get behind. They want, with all the enthusiasm, they want to adopt. But I think the trajectory will be more, we will evolve into more better curated data, using our own data. Gen AI is a model. And we have been dealing with model risk management for a long, long time in banking. In particular, large bank has been doing model risk management more than 10 years now. So knowing that a Gen AI is a model, and complicated model, by the way, all the process governance things can be done. The same way with some enhancement. There are a few things that really probably stand out. What makes Gen AI different and why, how the model risk management need to get adjusted. Two things that when we talk about model risk, is one is the model is designed with flaw that we need to understand, limitation or flaw that we need to understand. That's applicable anywhere. Secondly, even a good model, it can be used wrongly. So in Gen AI, the second point, knowing the model limitation, how to use it right, not using it wrongly, that process needs to get adjusted because in predictive model, in traditional model, the user are very well trained, very specific. They have background. So the user are very well trained, and mostly very well trained, and they know how to use model properly. Now Gen AI, you open it to everybody. They're not accustomed to use model, don't know how to use model. So the risk of using it wrongly is becoming bigger. So that's where, how can we enhance the model risk management to manage that piece? Because when we look at it, now we're dealing with users that are in different stages. Subject matter expert user, like you use it for Copilot, coding. Well, the user are software engineer, they're expert. So the risk probably low on that. And then the user are internal user, it's probably okay. Assisting internal user is probably okay, but it may not be okay if you apply to high-risk application. For example, complaint processing and all of those very high-risk application. Then we need to understand how this thing can be wrong and what's wrong. And then it's also assisting a customer if you're asking about legal issue or compliance and things. The answer can be wrong because this model, just like traditional model interpolate, they can be wrong. Gen AI is no different. This is model. So we call it hallucination. It's interpolation, no different. So it can be wrong, and then just people need to understand how to use it. Then the other piece is, okay, now we have internal user, but assisting external customer. Now the risk is higher because of that. And then let alone if we have Gen AI that interact directly with customer. That's even higher, the risk. So those pieces we need to understand because the risk of wrong usage really becoming more important. We need to understand if people doing it, people can be wrong too. And what level of wrongness, how much is acceptable? Okay, 20% wrong is acceptable. Then model need to be 20% or a little bit better. Don't expect the 100% or something. Set the criteria, how we're going to measure this, how to measure how wrong, and what is the acceptance criteria, and build and test model according to that. So I think that people need to really understand that. For me, I think what we need to get done is really looking at the application. Where do you think the application will be heavily regulated and that regulation will change? And that's typically dealing with something that high-risk application. So I think my advice is to walk slowly on that, to be careful. But outside regulation too, in terms of lawsuit and all of those things, because of data ownership and all of those things. This is something that get the legal partner really involved. Legal department need to opine on this and think about this, think about the bit long term, what's the implication and all of those things. Everybody using Gen AI today. Right? Yeah, you use your Google, you use your do ChatGPT outside, you do image your picture, enhance your picture. Everybody use Gen AI, whether they realize or not today. When you do your photo enhancement, which everybody do all the time, you use generative AI. But Gen AI to do their specific job? That's the question, I think. In 5 years, I wouldn't be surprised if part of their job, about 30% or some in that things will be somewhat enhanced with the Gen AI at some degree.